Welcome to episode 4 of my post-labor economics lecture. This one will be interventions and solutions. So basically the question is, great, Dave, I've bought into post-labor economics. What do we actually do? How do we actually implement this? Starting on Monday morning, day one, what are the things that we do? So diving right in, first and foremost, you have to understand that one of the key philosophies of post-labor economics is that we have to give individuals, and so everything from households up to the nation and every step in between, a menu of options. Now, here is kind of 5 of the overarching classes of interventions that we have options of generating. And so let me just read it to you. Turning underused assets into automatic dividends requires clear channels or pipes that move cash flow to citizens without heavy bureaucracy. This is one of the primary things, is we want to get the government out of the way as much as possible. So many of these are market-based and private property-based solutions. However, in some cases, we will need government intervention to help out, which I know that some people are allergic to that, but you also have to consider that, Medicare, Social Security, there's all kinds of things that the government does run, but we don't want to be overly reliant on the government. We don't want to put all of our eggs in one basket. So these models are proven, legally sturdy, and scalable from a single firm to an entire county. Some of them are scalable up to the state and federal level as well. Through extensive research, I've found a ton of options, and I've actually got a blog post that has many more options over on Substack. So ESOPs and patron equity, employee and customer share programs let workers or buyers earn equity slices that pay out as firms grow. So ESOPs are pretty well established, and then patron equity is one of the slightly novel innovations where it's like an ESOP, but instead of earning shares from working there, you actually earn shares by shopping there. So it's the same principle, but it's just you expand it so that, for instance, if you have a local company that you shop at, you earn more equity the more you shop there so that you become an owner of the establishment, which then means that as the economy grows, as that company grows, so does your wealth. So that's something that you have direct control over, and the government doesn't need to participate at all. Now, some people have said, well, Dave, wouldn't companies do this already? There's plenty of ESOPs out there. There's plenty of employee-owned and profit-sharing companies out there. And patron equity, this is actually inspired by loyalty programs. So, for instance, credit cards that give you cash back, airlines that give you free miles, those sorts of things. So instead of giving you an immediate dividend or an immediate cash back, what they could do instead is just give you a share or something that pays residual income over time. Or it could just be permanent discounts. Who knows? There's any number of ways to do that. But basically, the net effect is that you have a larger stake in that business, which the business wins because then you're a returning customer, and then you win because you either get money back through some program or you get money back by virtue of spending less. Another example is community investment trusts, so local REIT style, so that's real estate investment trust style vehicles bundle neighborhood assets so residents buy as low as $10 shares and collect quarterly distributions. So this is actually inspired by a neighborhood in Seattle that is basically a local REIT where you have to live in the neighborhood and you can invest in the neighborhood. And as the neighborhood becomes more valuable, or some of the houses sell and pay better rent, you get more money back. So again, the government does not need to be involved in this at all, and the existing programs have very, very low buy-in fees. Next is land value dividends. So counties capture rising site values via ground rents and recycle the proceeds into per resident payouts. So this is one of the things that people have mentioned in the comments is like, well, what about land value taxes? It actually turns out that is a viable path in some cases. Counties, states, and federal governments all own land, and much of it is being under-monetized. However, the land value is going to pale in comparison to the intangible value of, for instance, data, AI, or I guess it's not fully intangible, but the fully scalable revenue and value created by artificial intelligence and robots. However, by implementing something like land value taxes or land value dividends, you will give more people a floor so that they can actually participate in this growing economy. Next is royalty trusts. So this is data, this is spectrum, this is carbon sinks, and those sorts of things. Publicly owned intangibles. such as usage fees on bandwidth, carbon sinks, or civic datasets fund automatic rule-based dividends. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that due to commerce laws and other layers of jurisprudence, some of these cannot be done at the state or even the county level. Some of them have to be done at the federal level. For instance, spectrum auctions and those sorts of things. Anything to do with airspace is generally federal. Data can be done at pretty much any level because anyone can say, hey, we own our data. And then carbon can also be done at any level. So these are just a few examples of a couple of ideas. And then the last one is digital co-ops and tokens. So this is more exotic. This is like your network state ideas, as well as DAOs and those sorts of things. One thing that I'll point out is that network state is basically an international corporation, and a DAO is just a company. You don't need exotic technology to create those. They can be helpful, but they're certainly not necessary. What you need first is actual people buying in and best practices, because you want governance that works. You don't want necessarily to experiment on everything. Next up is county endowment funds. So this is something that I've been talking about for quite a while. And this is one place to start. So counties can convert dormant land, water rights, spectrum, or carbon sinks into perpetual funds that pay residents annual dividends. And I need to remove spectrum because upon research, I realized that you can't monetize spectrum at the county level. You could do bandwidth. So bandwidth, if they have a fiber co-op, that sort of thing would work. By professionalizing management yet keeping oversight local, these endowments turn public wealth into household income without raising taxes. That's one of the number one things, is if you have stuff that's just sitting on the table that you're not monetizing, then that's no good. But also by decentralizing it out to the county level, where you've got 3,100 American counties, where you can say, hey, local chamber of commerce, local county chair, you have the ability to manage some of these assets. Mechanisms. First, lease royalty or concession fees flow into a trust that reinvests cash flows and distributes a fixed share to every resident. And by fixed, it's not like, $100 every month. It would be a fixed percentage. Most government-run endowment funds or wealth funds pay out 70% of their proceeds and keep 30% for management, maintenance, and reinvestment. Next up is governance. An independent board, half elected, half expert, publishes audited statements and follows a strict rule-based payout formula. This is actually, so the governance layer is actually where things like blockchain could be very helpful, because blockchain means that you could put all transactions, all meeting minutes, every disbursement, and those sorts of things, obviously with some information deduplicated or disidentified, but it becomes an immutable record. So that way you have a public ledger that once it's updated, you can't unupdate it, and it becomes immutable, which increases transparency, and transparency increases accountability. So if your elected officials start trying to raid your endowment fund, you can say, hey, you're the one who cut the check. Where did that check go? As they say, sunlight is the best disinfectant, and blockchain all but guarantees full sunlight. Examples: the Alaska Permanent Fund, the Copenhagen City and Port Fund, Tribal and Energy Trusts, and all of these prove the model at varying scales and asset types. So the idea that you can run a wealth fund at a small level, at a state level, at a federal level, all of these are proven. And I actually had some fans reach out to me and tell me about more indigenous lands that kind of do similar things all over Canada and Alaska, actually. So there are plenty of examples, and we're gathering all these examples for the second book that we're working on. Democratic participation. Number one, residents vote on asset roll-ins, board appointments, and payout caps, anchoring legitimacy and local consent. So this is participatory insofar as there is transparency and democracy involved. But also, because it's local, you have the ability to invest not just your money or your residency, but also your time and energy into making and developing those assets. So for instance, if there is a community asset, like a community-owned forest or garden or those sorts of things, you can volunteer or contribute your time, energy, expertise, and labor to enriching both yourself and the community. And one thing I want to point out is many of these do not require government. Some of them do, but the only only two on this slide that require government are these two. So what we're doing is we're creating a portfolio of market-based private property solutions as well as government-based solutions. But once you tip the economy towards that property-based model, what we're really trying to do is incentivize innovation at the company and banking and household level. So next is local influences and investment. This is kind of what I was talking about, where endowment yields fund community projects, attract co-investment, and creating a flywheel of place-based prosperity. So this is one of the key features. Now, also what I've mentioned in a couple of the other presentations is this is just a starting point. Ultimately, we want to use the counties as a test bed, as each an individual laboratory, and then you want to scale it up to state, federal, and eventually global in the long run, where you have participatory ownership models at every level, as well as dividend-seeking behavior at the household level, and so on and so forth. And what this does is it actually still empowers the decentralized market, the social brain, so that every individual household that says, "I want more dividends," right? Right now, the way that the whole market works is people say, "I want more wages. I want more wages. I want more products. I want more services, and I want to save money." So we replace the wages part with "I want more dividends," and so then everyone's going to figure out how can I get the most dividends, and that's the market still functioning. So the next idea is banking for dividends. Banks can rewire their products so that ownership income flows straight into loan service and savings, turning dividends into everyday cash flow for households. This integration leverages existing compliance muscle, sparks product innovation, and keeps government in a light touch referee role. So number one, dividend seeking. Retail apps and loan dashboards steer customer towards assets that generate predictable payouts, automatically sweeping those dividends against mortgage or credit balances, or just depositing it into their checking accounts. I'm not really sure why the AI decided to just say it's against mortgage and credit balances. Maybe it was thinking that it was all done through credit cards. Anyways, dividend seeking. You bank with certain banks, you buy certain products, you sign up for certain programs, and you get kickbacks, you get loyalty points, those sorts of things that all get put into your bank account. End of the day. Next is regulatory flattening. Banks shoulder KYC, so that's know your customer, custody, tax reporting, collapsing the red tape that stymies direct citizen participation in sophisticated assets. Basically, instead of having to be a financial expert, because this is one of the concerns that some people have brought up, rather than having to be an expert in governance and data provenance and all of these other programs, you can just participate in all of these programs through your bank. They can handle a big part of it. Now, of course, they will be rent seeking, though they're going to get their fee. But in a post-labor future where banks are not getting money deposited in it from wages, banks are going to want to get money getting deposited from somewhere. So they might as well help you find all of these sources of dividends and royalties and trust fees and those sorts of things, as well as UBI. So banks are going to be competing with each other for the willing wallets of the households that are getting some UBI, as well as these other royalties and dividends. Ultimately, the goal is innovation facilitation. Securitized dividend streams, revenue share notes, and tokenized equity funds give households diversified slices of new asset classes and growing asset classes. Robots, artificial intelligence, data centers, solar, fusion when it comes around. All of those things you're going to want to be able to hook into. Now, on an individual level, what many people have brought up as concerns, on an individual level, you might not have enough money to compete with the big dogs. However, your bank does. So this is where we introduce the concept of collective purchasing power. So this was inspired by collective bargaining power, which was an innovation of more than a century ago, where collective bargaining allowed labor unions to be created so that they could negotiate better terms for workers. Conversely, collective purchasing power means that you, along with everyone at your bank, your credit union, or your county or your state, can pool your purchasing power to make sure that you can buy data centers and robots and solar farms and fusion reactors and those sorts of things so that you all get a chance to buy in. Then you have competitive incentives. Lenders compete on transparency and yield-boosting features. Emphasize yield-boosting features, pushing the market towards lower fees and clearer risk disclosures. So basically, when banks are competing for your business, they have to say, hey, we're taking lower fees, we're giving you better results, and we're more transparent and more accountable. That's how the market forces will ensure that banks pay nice or play nice, because if you've got a shady bank and they tend to lose customers' money or they take too many fees, guess what? You vote with your wallet. And right now, if you don't like where you work, you vote with your feet. Voting with your wallet is something that you can do right now as well. Look at Target. People are very unhappy with Target because of their political activity, and so the CEO has lost half of his pay, and Target stores are largely empty because they trash their DEI programs and a few other reasons. And so, you know what? People have voted with their wallet, and that's a very clear, powerful signal. Target, we don't like your policies. Now, in the future, voting with your wallet will be based on like, hey, how much cash back am I getting? How much patron equity am I getting? How transparent are you about these things? Those are the kinds of things that will allow market competition to still favor households and consumers. Now, minimal government is one of the key features that we were looking for, because some people out there want to have a government top-heavy program that's all UBI just because it's a big crayon thinking and it's easy to put on a spreadsheet where you say, well, the government or, the nation has this many people and they need this much UBI, so this is what taxes must be. And that's, they pat themselves on the back and say, good job, everybody. We did the math and we figured it out. But they're not looking at the fact that you probably don't want to do that. So minimal government is a big feature of this that basically should please both sides of the aisle. Right-wingers are going to like it because it's, less government is better. And then left-wingers are going to like it because then it's like, hey, we don't have to raise taxes, so it's easier to implement. Now we just need to incentivize the market to do it. But then also people win, and it raises the level of equality and so on and so forth. Moving on. Regulatory tweaks. So you might say, Dave, all this sounds good, but there's going to be so much red tape and that sort of stuff. What we've done is, as we've been researching post-labor economics, is looking at existing programs that have been proven out to be both, at the highest level, they pass muster and they're constitutional, because some of the ideas that we've come up with are just flat out unconstitutional. For instance, you can't prevent someone from moving to a state or a county based on their money. That is unconstitutional. So you can't say, like, because this is something that some people were afraid of. They were like, hey, well, what if a rich county wants to freeze people out? And it's like, you actually can't do that. There are other ways to freeze people out if they're priced out, sure, but you cannot legally say you're too poor to live in this county. That's not how this nation works. Anyway, so a few surgical rule changes can unleash property income products without rewriting financial code base. By clarifying safe harbors and modernizing payment rails, lawmakers let existing vehicles power post-labor economic aligned dividends at national scale. So first, extant vehicles. Trusts, cooperatives, and REIT-style funds already exist. Minor amendments align them with broad dividend distribution and EAI reporting. EAI is Economic Agency Index. Next is safe harbor rules. Micro-dividend funds need bright line exemptions from onerous fund registration when payouts per investor stay below set thresholds. Basically, as long as you're not making millions of dollars on dividends, it should just be rolled into your bank statement. TLDR, like where it's just like, hey, you're getting $50 a month from this dividend and $150 from this dividend. We're just going to have the bank report all your dividends at the end of the year, so that you don't need to worry about taxes on every single level and those sorts of things. And also, if they're below a certain threshold, you just don't get taxed on them. Portable capital gain deferrals. Allow gains rolled from one qualifying dividend asset into another, keeping capital compounding inside the ownership ecosystem. So there's a few ways that this makes sense. So think about the dividends that you get from a county endowment trust and from a state endowment trust, dividends that you get from patron equity and those sorts of things. By rolling them all together, as long as they're qualified dividends, meaning it's an asset that you've owned for long enough, and so on and so forth, as long as that compounding, or as long as you're using those dividends for compounding, then you probably don't get taxed on it, or don't get taxed on it as much, because it's the same reason that you incentivize people to own homes, where you say, hey, we're going to give you all sorts of tax breaks for owning a home because we want to incentivize you to own a home. In this case, we want to incentivize you to save money and reinvest that money as much as possible. Next up is simplified public benefit charters. Streamlined filings let mission-driven entities raise capital and share profits without the complexity of a full B Corp conversion, or just making B Corps simpler. So for instance, let's say that you're in, County A, and you have an idea of like, hey, here's some assets that we want to monetize, and we want it to be tightly integrated with the county economy, but it's not a for-profit. It's not a full for-profit company. It's a local benefit company. You want to be able to set that up relatively easily, either as an ESOP or a co-op or that sort of thing. Again, it's not overhauling the tax base. It's just saying, hey, we want to incentivize this model. And then technical rails, so this is the technology stack. Instant settlement systems like FedNow and same-day ACH clear dividends in seconds, while open APIs and EAI dashboards and feed EAI dashboards in real time. Basically, make everything API driven. And actually, I've had some people reach out and say they want it to be MCP driven so that AI can hook in, which I think is a great idea. Next up, priming the ownership pump. So again, one of the many questions that people ask me is, Dave, we don't have any money to get started. And that has exactly been baked into post-labor economics, because we understand that most people in today's world don't even have $500 for emergencies, let alone lots of savings. I think it's something only like 10% of Americans have more than 3 years worth of savings at retirement. So yeah, the idea that we have lots of money sitting around to invest, I know that nobody has that. I don't have that. So anyways, early capital injections create the cash flow groundwork on which lasting dividend streams can grow. Emphasis on the streams can grow over time. By blending public bonding, private philanthropy, and smart incentives, counties jumpstart wealth funds that quickly snowball into self-sustaining payouts. So this is looking at, for instance, just the county level. First is seed capital stack. Municipal green bonds, catalytic philanthropy, and sovereign match grants provide the first tranche of dividend-bearing assets. So basically, if County A wants to set up their wealth fund, what they can do is they can use bonds at the very minimum. You can also have people buy in if the county is seeding it with existing assets. You can have people buy in with what's called a NAV, or a net asset value unit, or what we're calling a CCU, a county capital unit. So there's all kinds of ways that you can have people buy in and start getting dividends. Next is a floor via UBI. A modest universal basic income supplies baseline demand that lets property dividends amplify rather than replace household cash flow. So this would be relying on it at a federal level or a state level. Now, there have been cities that have implemented UBIs or guaranteed income programs, so it can happen at any level. But the only problem is that UBI is funded by taxes, and if the UBI is too high, then taxes are too high, and then it doesn't work for a lot of reasons. At the same time, a modest UBI, and when I say modest, I mean like $300 a month. This basically says, okay, you have some aggregate demand. That gives you a little bit more headroom so that you can start spending more and investing more. Wealth funds, county, state, and federal endowments pay regular dividends that both stabilize demand and bankroll further asset acquisition. This is the number one thing, is that it takes money to make money, right? I'm sure you've heard that saying out there. If you don't have any money to start with, then you're kind of up the creek without a paddle. However, as your urban wealth fund and your state wealth fund and your sovereign wealth fund, as they start to grow, they end up with more purchasing power, meaning they can acquire more and more assets. And more assets in your wealth funds means that you have more dividends. And then tax incentives. This is another innovation that we've cooked up, where we call it a qualified ownership donation. So basically, TLDR, I think I mentioned this in another one, but TLDR is that a successful company, can pay some of their tax burden by donating shares. So instead of doing a buyback program where they hold the shares, they donate shares to wealth funds. And so that gives them an immediate tax break. But then also, if those shares pay dividends, then they also get tax break on those dividends in perpetuity, meaning that companies have a win, because it's like, hey, we donate some shares and we reduce our tax burden. We donate enough shares, our tax burden trends towards zero. And by the way, as we grow, all of our customers also grow. So that's one of the tightest entwinings that I've come up with so far. And then I already mentioned the NAV units or the CCUs, so county capital units. Good grief, that's a tongue twister. Let high net worth residents buy in early, seeding funds while gaining tradable stakes pegged to net asset value. So basically, it's a resident-based share program. So you have one share per resident. However, or one voting share per resident in a county. But then if you have high net worth people or anyone with money wants to buy more shares, they say, I want to invest in Austin, Texas, right? They can buy more capital units that are non-voting. But they're purchased at net asset value, meaning that they don't cause dilution. All right, anyways, moving on. Techstack and Data Ops. Robust, transparent data rails power everything from county dashboards to automatic dividend drops. By standardizing open APIs first, we let future AI and smart contract layers plug in without rewiring the core. So this is basically AI and blockchain ready, is kind of one of the goals here. Information dashboards, county level EAI reporting, KPI monitoring, and real-time tracking come before any policy experiments can run. We're actually working on creating the first EAI dashboard as we speak. So yay, go us. Thank you for the people that have reached out to help. Information is power here, and if you can see what's being spent where people are getting their money, and you can say, hey, this county over here has really good property income. What are they doing different? And then you can go talk to those people, talk to their banks, talk to their companies, talk to their county commissioners, and say, what did you do to offset your need for wages and transfers? Next is banking rails. So the banks already have pretty sophisticated rails, but they do need a little bit of upgrade. So API-driven networks and agentic frameworks tie banks, wallets, and endowments together. An easier lift as AI automates back office code. Basically, you might say, "Wow, these sound like really, really big coding tasks." But here's the thing: if AI is good enough to take all the software engineering jobs, then we have a hyperabundance of code. And next up is the more exotic technologies. So blockchains, DAOs, cryptocurrencies, and those sorts of things. They're not required. I know that there's been a few people out there that say like Bitcoin will solve all of this, but that's not really what Bitcoin is. Like Bitcoin is a currency. It's not a DAO. It's not a dividend system. It's not even a distribution system. It's literally just a currency. Now, that's not to undermine, its value as a deflationary asset. You put your money in Bitcoin and it goes up over time. I think, what was it, 2 years ago or 3 years ago, it was $25,000 a Bitcoin, and now it's over $100,000. So this is not investment advice, but there's a book out there called The Bitcoin Standard. You should read it, and you'll understand where Bitcoin fits into this future ecosystem. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution. So next, you have ideas around more blockchain-based things, so that's distributed public ledgers, DAOs, which is a way of using proof of ownership and proof of stake in order to collectively own and manage resources. I will say that these are a wonderful idea, but they're so far unproven, and I know that there's plenty of smaller DAOs out there. But if they were everything that they promised to be, then they would be catching on faster, but they aren't. But they aren't what they're promised to be, and so they aren't catching on. Time will tell if they mature, but we don't need those technologies. That's one of the primary things. Is nothing in post-labor economics requires exotic technology. It will be powered by exotic technology, namely artificial intelligence and robots. Anticipated innovation, humanoid robots and white-collar AI, free talent to build these platforms even faster, accelerating deployment. Furthermore, it's just a matter of self-interest. If you're losing your jobs, you want to say, hey, why don't we build the platform that's going to allow us to redistribute this wealth that the AI and robots are creating? Transparency and usability, clear data views and consumer-grade UX, ensure households and markets trust and actually use the new ownership channels. Again, one of the primary things is, Dave, all of these ideas that you're talking about are super Byzantine. So how do we participate? The idea is that you have an app on your phone, or several apps on your phone from your various banks and other things, where you can just say, hey, where do I invest my money right now? Where do I invest these dividend streams? Where do I reinvest? How do I find the best dividend producing deals? And we call that the principle of the willing wallet and dividend seeking behavior. Pilot pipeline. So you might say, okay, all this sounds great. What are you going to do? What's the first step? So launch with a small group of pioneer counties to prove the models, Generate fast feedback and refine playbooks before wider rollout. Success is gauged by rising EAI scores, which we're building the EAI dashboard right now, dividend coverage ratios, and resident satisfaction, paving a clear path from county wins to state and federal adoption. Candidate counties. So we're going to start with 3 to 5 regions with diverse economies to implement KPI tracking and targeted ownership interventions first. This is actually even getting a little bit ahead of the cart, putting the horse ahead of the cart too much. What we're actually going to do is we're starting with the dashboard itself so that we can then look at every county and look at how the counties have changed over time. So then we can identify which counties have done the best already. Because nothing in economics, nothing beats actual historical data. There's theory on one hand, but if you have empirical data saying, hey, this county over in New Mexico is doing really well and this county in Arkansas is doing really poorly, what's the difference? And then when you have 3,100 counties to compare, then we have a lot more to go on. Iterative refinement. Rapid feedback loops document results and disseminate best practices as additional counties join the program. Now, one of the other things about post-labor economics is it's not like one big massive program that everyone can join. It can be as uninvolved or as involved as anyone wants to be. It can be adopted piecemeal with one idea at a time, although the big idea is the wealth fund. Although the county wealth fund or the urban wealth fund is not required at all to join. It's just one of the easiest big crayon ways to think about it. Next is reach milestones. Each cohort aims to boost residual property income by double-digit percentages through high-leverage policies. State scaling. Proven county playbooks graduate to statewide initiatives, standardizing data reporting and endowment structures. And then federal scaling. Mature best practices inform national guidelines and incentives, extending ownership pipelines wherever appropriate. So basically the idea here is that over the next couple of years, we're hoping that to prove out post-labor economics principles, and then over the next couple of years after that, graduated up to the state level, and then by 2035-ish, hopefully, we'll have it all implemented at the federal level. Now, that is insanely ambitious. However, when you look at the rate of progress of AI and robotics, it'll be necessary by 2035. I don't mean nice to have by 2035. I mean necessary by 2035. So next up is risk and governance. So strong guardrails preserve local benefit and public trust as ownership pipeline scale. One of the biggest things is elite capture, and so you can have that from wealthy people twisting the system. You can have it from corrupt politicians twisting the system. Clear voting rules, full transparency, and clawback tools keep funds from drifting into capture or self-destructive cash-outs. Number 1, anti-capture safeguards. County residents hold majority voting power, ensuring benefits remain rooted in the community. So even if you have someone outside of the community buy in, for instance, let's say that you have a wealthy billionaire, Bill Gates decides to invest in your county, he doesn't get voting rights because he doesn't live there. Likewise, if a big wealthy company says, I want to bring a data center, but we get voting rights. You say, nope, you don't get voting rights. We get royalties from your data center, and so on and so forth. But you don't get voting rights. You can vote with your wallet, but if every county is doing the same thing, now of course counties will then compete over things like getting data centers and solar farms. But hey, maybe the county builds their own data center and leases it out to the big providers. Dividend clawback. So this is another important thing. So rules revoke payouts from dividend tourism or corrupt jurisdictions instead of resorting to costly bailouts. This was one thing that some people have brought up is, okay, well, what if you have a really corrupt county and they go bankrupt? What do you do then? Because then what if they just end up taking from the state? The state says, we'll give you a bailout once, right? But you have to reform your governance and transparency and all that stuff. And if it happens again, you just claw it back. And so the state courts dismantle that county, their assets, give it back to the investors, which is the people, the residents, and then they can start again. Next is transparency mandates. Bond-backed or state-supported funds must publish audited ledgers and real-time dashboards. Basically, this is a huge opportunity for startups. Once post-labor economics starts to take off, we're going to need companies providing these services. So that's going to be banks that are going to be running the funds themselves, and then also the tech that is providing the reporting and everything else. Voting and property rights. Simple public documentation spells out how units can be sold, transferred, or voted. Again, this might sound exotic, but there's already a There is a ton of established best practices going back many decades about how to run cooperatives, trusts, royalty funds, wealth funds, and those sorts of things. The best practices are out there, but as long as everything is documented and everyone understands it and agrees on it, there you go. And then self-harm guardrails, because another question that people have asked is like, well, what prevents you just from selling all of your shares and going on a bender or gambling it away or something? So you do the same kind of stuff that you have on retirement accounts today. Withdrawal limits and cooling off periods deter reckless cash outs that could hollow out household wealth. Another thing that you do is some of these are non-transferable units. So for instance, your county share is non-transferable. You can't sell your county share to someone else. The only way you can get rid of it is if you leave the county. And so then it transfers back. But so you have one residency share that is just tied to you, kind of like how your social security number is tied to you. It's not something you have direct control over. Next is startup ecosystem surge. So this is how we know that we're going to get to the tipping point of post-labor economics. As property income pipelines open, greenfield niches appear for companies that onboard governments, banks, and citizens into PLE structures. First movers enjoy a blue ocean window before incumbents retool. First movers, early PLE specialists lock in platform relationships with counties, firms, and lenders seeking turnkey onboarding. Basically, all of these ideas, you're going to have financial consultants and technology consultants and all kinds of people saying, hey, we're going to help you implement post-labor economics because as wages go down, you're going to need another way of engaging with your customers, with your residents, and so on and so forth. Blue ocean, new asset classes and dividend rails spawn opportunities no incumbent roadmap currently covers. We don't know what all of the opportunities that materialize are going to be. We're just kind of providing a low resolution roadmap and some rules of the road to engage in this new thing. So once people understand a property-based future, a dividend-seeking future, instead of a wage labor future, it's going to be up to the market and a lot of you out there watching this to come up with new asset classes and investment vehicles and ways of implementing it. So for instance, you might end up with a startup who is really good at just setting up county funds, right? Like that's the thing that we're good is initial seeding. And then you have another startup that comes in and says, we're going to help you grow that fund. And then another company that says, hey, we're going to help you tie in and use your dormant land and those sorts of things. Market disruptors. Startups, banks, and municipalities gain unfair advantages by carving out unique ownership channels. Every region has something special about it, whether it's coastlines or rivers or forests or sunlight, something. Every geographic area has an unfair advantage. So then it's a matter of how do we use that? Do we have good weather that we can monetize with tourism and outdoor activities? Do we have lots of water that we can utilize? Those sorts of things. And then compounding returns. Replacing wage share with scalable property income ties startup growth directly to rising GDP and automation gains, which then also pays dividends, literally and figuratively, for residents and people that are out of work. And then the incentive structures. Aligned profit sharing and open APIs make rapid adoption both commercially viable and socially desirable. It's all about aligning incentives. It's a matter of creating the win-win-win, where households win, governments win, and companies win. And banks are a type of company. So we want to create a situation where everyone wins in this new paradigm, where everyone can take a slice of the pie of the growing pie of automation, AI, and robotics. And then there's some ancillary benefits. A property-anchored economy doesn't just plug post-labor gap, it seeds greener choices, tighter communities, and shock-proof prosperity. As ownership diffuses, households gain time and capital to invest where it matters. First up, sustainability. More free time and capital pushes citizens towards assets and products that meet long-term ecological criteria. You want your dividends to grow over time. So just in terms of dollars and cents, even if nothing else is true, you're going to say, hey, I want reliable dividends that grow over time. So now instead of thinking quarterly, you're thinking on decade-long time scale. So you're saying, hey, if we invest in this solar co-op now, that's going to be better than investing in a coal plant, right? Furthermore, if you're spending more time out in your community and in your local area, you're going to want it to look better. Like this is how we build that solar punk future is the aesthetics of your area will actually make it more desirable. And the more desirable your area is, the more valuable your investments become. So you're like, hey, instead of just selling property to developers as fast as possible. We actually want it to be sustainable long term. We want the county to be solvent. We want the city to be solvent. We want the state to be solvent. We want everything to be growing sustainably rather than looking for quick wins. And especially looking for quick wins at the expense of culture, aesthetics, and environment. Next up is circularity. Local dividends reward tighter supply chains and hometown spending, locking value inside the community. If you want farm to table, if you want circular economies, then what you need to do is you need to incentivize it in a local property-based model. And it doesn't have to be strictly local. There's plenty of other things you can invest in nationally and globally. However, if you have that unfair advantage of local information and you invest locally and you get money back from shopping locally, guess what? You're going to be more invested, and more of those resources are going to be kept inside the boundaries of your city, county, or state. And this boosts self-sufficiency. County and state level ownership funds build anti-fragile systems less dependent on distant suppliers. The combination of sustainability and circularity leads to more self-sufficiency, meaning that, hey, if you have an unfair advantage, meaning that you're close to a city and you can save on shipping costs, guess what? You're going to use that, and then your economy shrinks physically. I don't mean like in terms of GDP, but I mean the distance traveled between producer and consumer, consumer, and supplier all shrinks. And actually, interestingly, one of the first places we've seen this was with Stargate. Sam Altman was talking about on an interview how they're looking at all the waste energy that, from oil wells and those sorts of things, and they're like, why don't we just use that waste energy to power our data centers? So that's an idea. That's a perfect example of circularity and self-sufficiency, where it's like, hey, where do we have some waste that we can use? Next up is stability. Diversified property income buffers households and regions against global downturns or wage shocks. The sun comes up every day. If your economy is more predicated on the sun, then guess what? You're going to be a little bit in better shape. And then finally, economic agency. When prosperity decouples from payrolls, every resident can invest wisely and control their financial destiny. This will actually give you more economic agency than you have today, because guess what? You can't get fired from your county. They can't force you to leave. I mean, yeah, you might be able to get priced out, but no one can walk you off the job if you or walk you out of your bank if you own resources. Now, obviously, like if you're throwing a tantrum at your bank, they might call the police and escort you out. But my point is that employment at will goes away. Your livelihood is dependent entirely upon arbitrary decisions made by companies right now. Whereas if you own your own assets, like I do now for my YouTube channel and stuff, the only person who can fire me is YouTube, but it's as long as I don't violate any YouTube rules, I don't get fired. And by the way, I have multiple platforms. I have YouTube, I have Substack, I have Patreon, I have Twitter. So I have many revenue streams, and I can't get fired from any of them. So guess what? I have higher economic agency now today, even though I'm not making any more money than I used to, because I simply can't get fired. And when you have a property-based future, guess what? You can't get fired. And in fact, all you do is diversify your income streams over time. Getting off my soapbox now. All right, thanks for watching. Next up is going to be episode 5, which is the transition period. So the transition period is, okay, how do we get from here to there? What's the timeline look like? What are the pitfalls that we need to look out for? How rocky is it going to get? And that sort of thing. So thanks for watching to the end. I'll talk to you next time.